Take any 20th century Indian male poet, and you will find at least one poem that is written on his mother. What is it? The connection between mothers and poets? Is it because Indian mothers spoil their sons rotten? Or is it for some other reason? Because mother does not always mean an individual, it also means a memory, a time that is lost, a life you look back at. And what do we find when we see Ezekiel looking back at a moment in his childhood that he transforms into such a beautiful poem in The Night of the Scorpion? Nissim Ezekiel never knew that he was going to be a poet when he started working as an advertising copywriter. It was the Writers' Workshop that was founded by P. Lal in Calcutta in 1958 that transformed the journey of not just Nissim Ezekiel but also many other Indian writers. Often, Ezekiel is hailed as the father of Indian English poetry, who was also a writer of plays. He was born in Bombay in a Jewish family, received the Sahitya Akademi Award, which is a very prestigious award given to Indian writers. In fact, he also won the Padma Shri, which is one of India's highest civilian awards. In the poem, The Night of the Scorpion, we will see how he brought in a lot of experimentation in Indian poetry, which was, at least in the previous century, more about an imitation of the romantic poetry, or at the most, Victorian poetry. It was Ezekiel who brought in a lot of modern and even postmodern concepts in Indian poetry. What is the poem about? The poem is about an incident recorded in the poet's memory when his mother was stung by a scorpion. But how he describes that entire episode is quite remarkable because it transforms into some out of the world thing when you read the lines and try to visualize the entire scenario. Okay, so let's start. I remember the night my mother was stung by a scorpion. 10 hours of steady rain had driven him to crawl beneath a sack of rice. You would notice immediately that there is absolutely no rhyme. In fact, no meter or beats along which you can read it. It's more like prose, as if you are reading a story. Okay, this is called free verse, which is not constrained by the limitation or restriction of rhyme, rhythm, meter. So he is bringing in a kind of freedom to Indian poetry through free verse. Two very strong words are there in the first line itself: remember and mother. As I was telling you, that mother is more than just an individual. She is part of that memory. And with Indian poets as well as novelists, memory plays a very crucial role. And why is memory so important in Indian context? Because with the changing world, when you are losing sight of what is truly your own root, memory is what you hold on to. So this incident is rooted in the memory of the speaker, and memory, we know, is often not a photographic record. It also gets changed, right? Because of the ways in which we want to remember things. So what does this speaker remember? That the mother was stung by a scorpion, and then he goes on to tell that for 10 hours it was raining steadily and the scorpion was trying to find shelter beneath a sack of rice. So the backdrop is a rural, semi-rural setup where you can visualize a scorpion crawling beneath a sack of rice, parting with his poison. So maybe the mother had gone to take rice out of that sack to prepare food. And at that moment, the scorpion, it got scared and it stung his mother. Parting with his poison, flash of diabolic tail in the dark room, he risked the rain again. So the scorpion, after stinging the mother, crawled out of that place, out in the rain, and we don't see the scorpion anymore. It's gone, but the sting is there. The poison remains. Note the word diabolic. Diabolic means something which is devilish. Now, if you look at it from a scientific point of view, of course, there's nothing devilish about a scorpion's sting. It's natural reaction. The poison it produces is very, very natural, and it is by instinct that the scorpion stings the mother, because otherwise it would be killed. But the word diabolic places this whole thing into a different context altogether, places the natural within a supernatural context. It's like, because it stung his mother, so the scorpion is now a devil, and its tail is diabolic. That is, it belongs to the devil, because it is through the tail that the scorpion injects its venom. Now, after that, what happened? The peasants came like swarms of flies and buzzed the name of God 100 times. Now, while the scorpion is visualized as a diabolic entity, notice how the human beings who are coming are compared to flies, like they are buzzing the name of God. These kinds of comparisons create a disturbing idea in our minds that a speaker who is born in a Jewish household, how is he looking at a scenario where the peasants, obviously belonging to the Hindu community, they are buzzing the name of God. And why are they doing that? Because they believe that if a scorpion has stung somebody, then only God can help the person. And so they buzz the name of God to paralyze the evil one. Here we get to look at a very common scenario in Indian villages, especially, where victim of a snake bite, a scorpion bite, they are not rushed to the nearest hospital, but they are treated with indigenous roots and herbs, and the shaman and so-called holy men come and they do certain incantation as if to take away the poison. So this scenario is very, very familiar to us who know about Indian villages, about the superstitious practices of people who prioritize these rituals rather than taking actual medical help. And this is described in detail here, with candles and with lanterns throwing giant scorpion shadows on the mud baked walls. Interestingly, the men who are carrying these lanterns, if you imagine the figure of somebody holding a lantern like this, you would realize that if the shadow is cast on the wall, this hand would look like a tail, right? And that shadow will look like the shadow of a scorpion. So man who is confronting the evil or the devil is becoming that in the process. So these are the very subtle nuances that you get in Ezekiel's poem, and he doesn't explain these things in detail. He wants you to just have a touch of that sight or that idea, because it is memory, and memory is very fleeting, very flickering. He gives you flashes of the sights that he has in his mind when he thinks about that night. So human beings are first compared to flies buzzing, and now their shadows are like shadows of scorpions. So whom are they actually fighting? Who is the evil here? That is the most interesting thing here. While the villagers feel that the scorpion is the evil, we realize that they are actually fighting their own shadows. They searched for him. And why were they searching? Because it is believed that if you get hold of that snake or that scorpion who has stung somebody, then you kill that serpent or that insect and the sting goes away, the poison goes away. This is a usual, very unscientific belief that people have even now. So they searched for him. He was not found. We all know that the scorpion had left. They clicked their tongues. That is, they wish that they had found the scorpion. With every movement that the scorpion made, his poison moved in mother's blood, they said. They said that while the scorpion is alive, your mother will continue to have her pain, because the poison and the scorpion, they are connected even after the poison had left the body of the scorpion and entered the body of the mother. So this is again another superstition that we get to see, that it cannot be possible that the poison and the scorpion are still connected, but the villagers believe it. That is why they want to look for the scorpion, so that if they kill the scorpion, that connection will be lost and mother will be cured. May he sit still, they said. That if the scorpion is moving, the poison is also moving. This is what the villagers were thinking. And it might sound hilarious, but when people actually believe such things, and it's a dark night, rain falling incessantly, it is not a laughing matter, not to a child who is seeing the mother in so much pain. He is at that moment on this very, very precarious boundary between belief and non belief, whether he will believe the villagers or he will believe in logic, reason, and science. But he was a child. What about his father? We get to see him as well. May the sins of your previous birth be burned away tonight, they said. Now, the idea of previous birth, next birth, all these things are very much there in traditional Indian mythology or philosophy or religion. And it is believed that what you suffer in this life is either the karmic result of your previous birth's wrongdoings, that you have been a bad person in your previous birth, done something wrong, so you're suffering now to atone for it, or this is like an advanced payment that you are doing to ensure that something good will happen to you in your next birth. So, this is a way of actually providing some kind of consolation to a person who is suffering now. This is a common strategy in Hindu theology, you would say. So, they say that may the sins of your previous birth be burnt away tonight. So, either this pain is an atonement for what wrong you have done in your previous birth, or may your suffering decrease the misfortunes of your next birth. So, this can either be an atonement or an advance payment for something bad that you might do in your next birth. It doesn't sound logical, but faith and logic, they don't go very well together. Faith has never bothered much about logic or reason, has it? And then they say, may the sum of all evil balanced in this unreal world against the sum of good become diminished by your pain. Now, that is a very, very strange kind of a calculation we have. First of all, it said that this world is an unreal world. Now, that is also part of the Hindu belief that this world, as it is called, a world of Moha Maya, which is like the illusion. This doesn't exist, almost Platonic, right? That this is all copy of something actually existing somewhere else. So this world is unreal, first of all. And secondly, when anybody does anything good, it gets accumulated in some universal good. And whatever bad we do gets accumulated in the universal bad. And since the suffering of the mother is part of something bad she is experiencing, so this will balance against the universal good. So this is a strange kind of a calculation where a human being's individual suffering is not prioritized. And this is what an Indian society looks like. It transforms your individual suffering, it transforms your individual experience into something which is communal, something which belongs to the community, and something which has relevance in society at large. That means, why is this scorpion bite important? Not because an individual is suffering, but because the common pool of good is getting an advantage. Strange logic, but that's it. That's the way it is conceived in Indian philosophy, or philosophy of the people who at this moment are crowding inside the cottage of the speaker. May the poison purify your flesh of desire and your spirit of ambition. Very important lines. Desire of the flesh, what is also translated as calm, is considered to be like a cardinal sin in Hinduism. Ambition, something where you go beyond what should be your achievement, where you want to go beyond what you deserve. That ambition, like Macbeth's ambition, these are considered to be real evils. Why? Because they break the social fabric, and social fabric is very important for Indian philosophy, for Indian way of living. What is interesting is that the poison, which is first considered to be something from the devil, because it is from the diabolic tale, is considered to be an agent of purification. It's like a philosophical algebra is going on, like negative, negative, positive, that kind of a thing, where the poison will purify and take away the evils of ambition and desire. From this perspective, the poison is actually doing a favor to the mother. Now, for an Indian woman to have desire, you might say, well, that is a question that the feminist will ask. Why is desire considered even evil? Because it belongs to a woman? Those are the questions that are subtly touched but not considered at length. It's like Ezekiel is giving us hints, asking us, teasing us to think about these things, to feel whether these things are actually asked here, touched upon here. But this is the beauty of Ezekiel's poetry, and this is the beauty of memory. It doesn't stay at one point, it keeps on hovering over an entire scenario, capturing scene after scene and presenting it to us. And then rituals will take place, of course. They said, and they sat around on the floor with my mother in the center, because she is both an object of dread and an object of reverence. So she is placed at the center. The piece of understanding on each face. Everybody is convinced that they know why she is suffering. Everybody is convinced of their faith, and this conviction, this confidence is something you actually can't fight against. It's very difficult. And this conviction, this confidence is never provided by reason and logic, because reason and logic only provides doubt, questions. Faith provides answers. And simple rural people prefer that. More candles, more lanterns, more neighbors, more insects, and the endless rain, the kind of climactic movement of the lines. My mother twisted through and through, groaning on a mat. For the child, it was still his mother who was suffering. For the people gathered round her, she was like an object, like a problem that they are addressing. And what about the father? My father, skeptic, rationalist. Father here is presented as a scientific person who believes in reason and logic, and he knows that whatever the villagers are doing is not connected to an actual remedy. But why is he allowing this to happen? Trying every curse and blessing, powder, mixture, herb, and hybrid. Now he is, from his side, trying to apply ointments and stuff that he feels will soothe the mother's condition. And maybe back then, scorpion bites were treated with certain powders and stuff which he knew. So he treated his wife with that. But he wasn't sure whether his methods would be effective or not. He even poured a little paraffin upon the bitten toe and put a match to it. Paraffin is this oil you obtain from petroleum jelly. Okay, so that is like a Vaseline kind of a thing. So he did everything that came to his mind, because it was a moment of panic for him. And in a moment of panic, you cannot retain that calmness that I am a scientific person. I won't do this. When it comes to your near and dear ones, we all are susceptible to these things, right? That I am a logical person, but maybe I would prefer God to be on my daughter's side when she's going for an exam because there's an individual connected to me. So the same thing is happening here. The support system that science offers, skepticism offers, fails miserably in face of a personal emergency. And that is happening to his father. And what is the child looking at? The child is seeing a scenario where the father is setting his mother's toe on fire. The trauma of that memory, if you can imagine it, is a strong one. I watched the flame feeding on my mother. I watched the holy man perform his rites to tame the poison with an incantation. So, for him, that entire episode was like burning through hell. After 20 hours, it lost its sting. Now, why the poison was gone, the child doesn't know. He doesn't know whether the incantation worked, whether the powders and herbs and mixtures worked, whether the burning of the toe worked. Why the poison was gone, he doesn't know. And that is the very condition of belief that he wants to present to us. And it could be that if nothing was done, even then the body's own immunity, its own resistance would have made his mother survive on her own without any incantation and powders and herbs and mixtures. But we don't know for sure. So, this is the scenario that he wants to present in front of us. But then, how does the poem end? The poem doesn't end with something like a social message, it ends on a very personal note. My mother only said, "Thank God the scorpion picked on me and spared my children." So, the mother, she has been through all this suffering, and interestingly, at one point we begin to feel that maybe the sting of the poison was not as much painful as the remedies offered to her. The way she was singled out as somebody touched by the evil or the devil, and then the way her body actually faced a burning sensation in her toes. And then when she says, "Thank God the scorpion picked on me," as if the scorpion had decided to sting her deliberately, not accidentally. When she says this, we begin to have this feeling that maybe she's not just referring to the actual pain of scorpion bite, but also the 20 hours for which she suffered the various ways in which that treatment was done to her. So she thanks God that her children didn't have to go through those. So this is a poem about faith versus rationality. Yes, villagers' superstitions versus fathers' rational experiments. But at the same time, it's also about community life. The neighbors rushing in to help you. That is a good thing as well. Although unhelpful, they are at least trying to show some empathy to your suffering, human helplessness, that science can only provide questions, not the answers. So, nature follows its own course, and you cannot conquer it. That kind of an idea is also there. And the greatest irony that there is superstition, there is rationalism, both fail. What cures the mother? Time. 20 hours. So, after all the drama, it is time that heals. So, this is the final irony we get. And Ezekiel is not mocking faith or science. He is not doing that. But he shows how Indian life blends both, and how a child who is exposed to this kind of an episode grows up with that blended idea of faith and reason all in his one consciousness. So, you can read the poem as a study in cultural pluralism. No, superstition, rationalism, spirituality all coexist. And this is why this poem is often part of anthologies prescribed in various kinds of syllabus all across schools and colleges, because it reflects what it means to be an Indian villager, part of the Indian rural community, for whom the only way to fight against the forces of nature is to be one with each other. as a community. The poem is called The Night of the Scorpion, as if to declare that that night belonged to the scorpion. It was after 20 hours that the mother was cured. So when she was cured, it was no more night, it was daytime. So that entire night was the night of the scorpion, because the scorpion sting could not be defeated, could not be vanquished before day started. So it was not the night of the villagers, not the night of the mother, but the night of the scorpion, as if the scorpion won the fight, at least till it was daytime, when the mother finally got rid of the pain, but it was no more the night. I hope you have enjoyed the poem, and if you have this poem in your undergrad syllabus, maybe you will be asked to write a critical appreciation focusing on how the village life or the life of rural India is presented in the poem. You might be asked to write about the various ways in which treatments were offered to the mother and what it reflects. These two questions are very similarly answered. They all point to the same points that we have already discussed. If you are given any question focusing on how Indian faith system comes out in this kind of a poem, you should point out about the way in which the ideas of previous birth, next birth, unreal world, purification of flesh, all these things are very relevant in the context of Hindu belief system. Finally, if you are asked any question on the style of Ezekiel, you have to talk about the conversational free verse and why he uses this, because he wants to break the barriers, the obstructions created by westernized forms, and rather tries to treat poetry like it has always been done in Indian writing, not English, Indian writing, ancient Indian writing, which passed down as oral tradition, conversational poetry. So that is the flavor of Indian poetry that we get in Ezekiel. And when you are asked about style, you have to talk about the various figures of speech that he uses, simile, metaphor, imagery, and how the poem keeps on passing from one perspective to another, first from the perspective of the scorpion, to the villagers, to the father, to the child, and finally to the mother. So this one poem, the small poem, becomes like a milieu of perspectives. I hope you have liked the poem, and do let me know if you have any other poem by Ezekiel in your syllabus, because I love reading Ezekiel with you. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so now immediately, so that you get to know when we post our next video. Until then, this is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Bye-bye.